Let me go to the next installment very quickly, and this is in chapter 6. And this is going to be a series of stories, and the stories, what's kind of interesting is that the stories offer you some lessons. I picked out, as I went through chapter 6, two particular stories in verses 1 to 23, and I'll make that our next segment. 6, 1 to 23. What did I do with my... Oh. So I'm going to do 6, 1 to 23. Oh, did I skip one here? Yeah, that's my 5. That's C there. 6, 1 to 23. And this one is a story, two stories in particular, but stories about when you hit the panic button. There are two kinds of panic common in our lives. Panic over things in peril and panic over lives in peril. Okay? And God has a solution that is not to hit the panic button. This is something that Elisha has to learn. And this is the lesson of the panic button. So I want to take a look at first 1 to 7, and let's talk about losing your axe head. Okay? Doesn't sound really shocking and controversial or difficult, but I got to tell you, if what you do is chop down trees and you lose the axe head, you're pretty much out of business. This is what happens when the manufacturing plant blows their one machine that does what they do. Okay? Verses 1 to 7. Nice and loud, somebody.
Now the sons of the prophets said to Elijah, "Behold now, the place before you where we are living is too limited for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, and each of us take from there a beam, and let us make a place there for ourselves where we may live." So he said, "Go." Then one said, "Please be willing to go with your servants." And he said, "I shall go." And he went with them. And when he came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water. And he cried out and said, "Alas, my master, for it was borrowed." Then the man of God said, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place, and he cut off a stick and threw it in there, and made the iron float. He said, "Take it up for yourself." So he put it out his hand and took it.
Okay. Can we all agree it's a weird story? Let's just start off with weird story. The student needed a greater shelter for a common study place. Okay, so basically the GCBI Gilgal Bible Institute was having troubles. And they were ready to build the place together, and Elisha was asked to come with them, and he agreed, and he came in verse 3. So the trees are being harvested, and tragedy strikes when one of the young seminary students in verse 4 has a borrowed axe, and he doesn't have the axe head affixed to the handle properly, and it flies off into the River Jordan in verse 5. Now, as always, the response to the trouble is the lesson of the text. Listen, because you're not here just to learn Randy's little tidbits about the Bible. When you see a story like this, the response to the trouble is the lesson of the text. The response will either be exactly what to do or exactly what not to do. But you have to read it to figure that out, okay? So you either learn by someone's example or you learn how not to do what they did by their example, okay? So here's the thing. You can't change what you're handed, but you can change what you do about it. So the students in this, and I just want some quick observations. Let me give you 6. I think I picked up 6 observations about this particular student. Now you ought to feel for this story because this is a student in a Bible school. You're now asked to build a new classroom for the Bible school. You're doing it together. Foolishly, we gave you axes, okay? First, the seminary student decided to admit he lost his effectiveness and accepted help from the prophet. So let's say it this way. No help comes until you admit you have a problem. The second thing I notice is he could have sat down and he could have quit working. He could have said, "Oh, well, it must be God's will that I don't succeed. You know, my axe head flew off. It wasn't my fault. Nothing I can do about it." I saw this. I was at the carousel, it was a couple years ago. I was at the carousel of where the luggage comes out. You know, it shoots those luggage things out. And this particular airport, I can't remember which airport it was, but it had the launch up here, and then it went down and then went around the rack, you know. And somebody must have been getting aggressive or something with the conveyor belt or something, because they were shooting luggage out like it was a 45, Magnum. The things are flying out of there, and the luggage is coming out. Well, here's the thing: about half the luggage coming out was breaking on impact, so it's flying out, boom, and then there's underwear and socks and stuff hanging off the side, And it's like another one and another one. And there's a guy there who's like a sky cap or something, and he pulls up one of those big things. He's supposed to be getting all the luggage for a group. Now, he works for the airport. He works with those guys, but he's got a specific job with a specific group. He's not saying anything. He's letting it happen until it comes out to be his group. Then he's yelling. Like the other 12 people, they weren't in his group, so their underwear doesn't matter, right? So now I'm watching this thing, and it's shooting out. Now, another guy comes down from up above, sticks his head down. He says, "Hey, slow the belt down. You're breaking all the luggage." And the guy's going, "It's not my fault. Tony's up here, and and they're standing there arguing. In the meantime, more luggage is shooting out the thing and breaking on impact. And I'm standing there, and I'm looking at it like, we don't care if Tony did it. Shut it off. It's like some people are all about who's wrong, not about fixing the problem. Have you ever worked with people that they'd rather argue about how they weren't wrong than fix it? Did you ever go up to the counter, you get the wrong order at a fast food place? If you've been in Sebring for more than a day, you have certainly encountered this. And all of a sudden, everybody's going to stand there and point fingers at other people. I don't care, it's a burger. You got a whole bunch of them, just give me one. Okay, so I got chicken. It's not like, I'm not walking out damaged. If you just give me the burger I bought, I'm happy. I can imagine a group of GCBI students. I can imagine them going, chopping away, and all of a sudden, Becca's chopping away, and all of a sudden, whoop, okay, the thing goes off in the river. And there are some students, I'm not going to say who they would be, but some of you will go, "Hey, that's not my fault, man. I don't know what's wrong with, I don't know where they got this, but this is a cheap axe. And I don't know whoever they borrowed it from, but that guy should have kept his axe." Now, there's other students who would just keep chopping. There's no axe head on there, but they're just going to keep chopping. It's utterly ineffective, and you know what? Those are the ones qualified for church work. Because we have church committees that keep doing the same thing even when it doesn't work. I went to a church one time, and I was pastoring. It was my second church that I pastored, and I went and I looked at the annual budget, and 2/3 of the youth budget were spent on VBS. And I said, "Great. Tell me about VBS." And, "Oh, we do this big thing. We put everything into VBS." Okay, so did anybody come to the Lord through VBS? Well, no. Does anybody come to the church because of VBS? No. Then why are you spending so much money on VBS? Because, 30 years ago it worked really well. Yeah, but the axe head's gone and you're still hacking away. There's no axe head on there. Utterly ineffective. You think I'm kidding? So many ministries that have failed to maintain effectiveness, but they're still doing exactly what they were doing 25 years ago, because that's the way we do it. I gotta love this, because the student acknowledges that the axe head was borrowed. I think that's important. It wasn't his. He was effective when he was using something that wasn't his own. But he was able to use it in the same way. It's worth remembering our talents and our abilities, they're not ours either. They're on loan to us. I think you need to remember that you are effective when you use something, but don't own it. There isn't anything this side of heaven you own. You say, "Well, wait a minute, I worked hard to gain a knowledge of this." Oh, really? Did you make your heart beat while it was happening? Did you supply the oxygen you were breathing while you were learning it? Because there's an awful lot of stuff you don't take into account that God was giving you while you were getting what you were getting. Let me go a step further. Verse 5, as one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water. "Alas, my master, for it was borrowed." The man of God said, "Where did it fall?" And when he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it in there. You got to imagine that the student's going, "Yeah, the axe head flew off there." And the teacher's answer was, "Now we'll throw a stick in after it." Now, does anybody else see how dumb that is? That's a really dumb thing to do. I mean, that's as dumb as cloning mice. Really, think about it. Were we short on mice? Was there a mice shortage that we need you to make more mice? Okay, so the point is that this doesn't seem like the right way to do it, but listen. One of the things the student could have taken away from it is it's important to work really hard, but it's also important to keep track of how the tools are maintained. I want you to know that there's a lot of people working really hard at church that are not maintaining the tools of ministry at all. One of the tools is doing what you're learning to do. You can preach a long sermon. That doesn't mean you actually said anything. Okay? You've sat in this class. You already know it's possible to be long-winded and absolutely not say anything. So the point is, I lose my effectiveness for God when I drop out of regular reading and study of His Word and I get too busy. And now I'm busy ministering, but I'm not maintaining the tools of ministry. When I stop being faithful in attendance in those times when God's at work in me, and all of a sudden I have to be doing something else, I lose my effectiveness. I get too busy to really pray about things, or I stop really applying discipline in my heart and start looking at things that don't honor God, or I hold back giving to the Lord what He's telling me to do, rationalizing that I have other needs that are more important. When I do those things, I'm not maintaining the main thing I have. All you have to give God is you. And if you don't, you give Him nothing. All you have is you. You have two hands. Those are the only two you can give God. You can desperately try to give your children's, but they have a will of their own. You only have 2 feet you can give God, 2 hands you can give God, 2 eyes you can give God, 1 mind you can give God, 1 heart you can give God. And if you don't give Him that, you didn't give Him what He asked for. And He's not into you figuring out what gifts He should want. He's into you giving Him what He does want. Now, if I look deeply inside, I'm going to find that there's some critical reasons for my own ineffectiveness. I look at this story of a guy who loses an axe handle, and I see a guy who's working hard in ministry, but ultimately the wood's not getting chopped, so the thing's being ineffective. And I see that the axe head fell off, and all of a sudden I'm looking out, and I'm asking myself, why is my ministry not going where I think it should go? And here's what I see. God is about to move the normal to the extraordinary, and He's going to pull him through. Now, how does He get God to do it? He opens His mouth and admits to someone that he has a problem. He goes to someone who does have a demonstration of God at work in his life. Listen to me, that can be your roommate. But do me a favor, don't sit there and plunge into a deep depression by yourself, expecting everyone around you to know what's wrong with you when you can't articulate what's wrong with you. Tell them. And don't just tell anybody, and don't tell somebody just because you want them to like you or be involved in your life. Tell somebody who's got God at work in their life, because you're not going to get anywhere until you do. The other thing is, I think that the young prophet, I don't mean this in a pun, but he lost his cutting edge. Elisha, what did Elisha do for the kid? What did he say to him? Do you remember? Where'd you lose it? That's the question. Where did it go wrong? When ineffectiveness comes, the question you have to ask is, when did it stop? You have to ask the counselee what they think happened. It's important for you to know what they think happened. Slipping in areas of personal discipline might not be obvious to everybody else, but just remember, no man suddenly becomes base, no large tree suddenly falls. It's done crack by crack, it's done termite by termite. These things happen in ways that people don't even perceive, but the tragic results are there. Now, the final thing I noticed about this is that Elisha did not retrieve the axe head for him. What did he do? He threw something else in the water, which I've already said I thought was kind of weird. But then what did he tell the guy? Yeah. Go be involved in your own recovery. Don't miss that. You want to heal people? Get them involved in their own recovery. He needed to admit that he had a problem. He needed to seek help, but that didn't take his responsibility to work the solution away. He had to also do that. We have to take a long and serious look at our cutting edge for kingdom service, our effectiveness in getting a job done. And we are no longer effective if we can't admit what we've done and we can't recognize that our ability's been cut off and we don't understand how it's happening. So I just think that this passage is a great passage to sort of, the first story really gives you a good picture of effectiveness. Now, quickly, let's switch over to the second story. Second story is 8 to 23, and this is a servant with bad vision, okay? Somebody read 8 to 23 fast. Put it out there.
Now the king of Aram was warring against Israel, and he counseled with the servant, saying, In such and such a place shall be my king. And Adonijah went to the king of Israel, saying, Beware that you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down there. The king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, so he could guard himself there more than once or twice. Now the heart of the king of Aram was arranged over this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, Will you tell them which of us is for the king of Israel? One of his servants says, No, my lord, O king. But Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words you speak in your bedroom. And he said, Go and see where he is, that I may send and take him. And it was told to him, saying, Behold, he is in Dothan. He sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Now when they tended of God, or of the man of God, had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And the servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, Do not fear, for those are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray, open my eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots and fire all around Elisha. When they came down from him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, Strike these people with blindness, I pray. So he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Then Elisha said to them, This is not the way, nor in this city, or is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you speak. And he brought them to Samaria. When they had come to Samaria, Elisha said, O Lord, open the eyes of these men, that they may see. So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. Then the king of Israel went and saw them, and said to Elisha, My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? He answered, You shall not kill them. Would you kill those who have taken captive in your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And the marauding bands of the Arameans did not come again into the land of Israel.
You have to love this story. It's one of my favorite stories in all the Bible. How many of you have this on your upper list? The story of being able to see or not being able to see. The whole thing hinges on what do you see when you look out. Now again, the first story was really a story designed to help you understand effectiveness. I want you to see how the second story also deals with that same concept, and it deals with what do you do? Do you hit the panic button, or does God have something else? This time the panic button is not going to be a kid who lost an axe head. The panic button is going to be when a servant of a man of God looks out and sees the house surrounded by enemy troops. Okay, follow the story. Maybe, let me say it this way, maybe your problem isn't discipline. Maybe you're a reasonably disciplined person. Maybe what your real issue is you know how to do the Christian life, you're pretty good at it, and you know how to stay away from the wrong things, and you feed on the right things, but the problem is somewhere in the process you found the whole thing powerless. It's not that you're undisciplined, it's not that you're involved in sin, it's that you're living the life, but there doesn't seem to be any power behind it. And here's what I want you to see. Listen very closely to this sentence. Where the enemy sees no lack of discipline, he attacks a lack of faith. Where the enemy sees no lack of discipline, he attacks a lack of faith. Faith is seeing it the way God says it is, not the way my eye sees it without him. So when we talk of sight in the spiritual realm, we're talking faith, right? So God glasses. This is what faith is. I put on my God glasses and I see it through God's biblical worldview. The Syrian king couldn't get any traction under his ambushes against Jehoram, and in verses 8 through 10 of chapter 6, he finds himself thwarted. He assumed that there was a leak in verse 11, and somebody's getting something through, and he was informed that God's prophet was blocking Israel. So here's an Aramean king, and he's informed every time you try to attack Israel, it doesn't work, and here's why it doesn't work. They have a prophet, and God is whispering in his ear, and you're going to have to do something about the prophet, or you are not going to be able to pull off a surprise attack against a prophet of God. That's what I want you to know. God is never surprised. That word is not in his vocabulary. Surprise doesn't happen to God. And as a result, people who are walking with God, hand in hand with God, when they don't see it, know that God did. So instead of being panicked, the surprising development makes them go back to the Father because they don't know, but they know He does. God, I don't know what I'm doing in this hospital, but I know You know. What am I here for? Who am I here for? God, I don't understand. I've done everything I can to maintain this car, and I'm sitting on the side of the highway. What am I doing here? Not, God, why did You forget me? But what am I doing here? You got me here for a reason. I've done everything I could do, and that's all that You could ask me to do. Now, if I'm here, there's a reason. Now, take a look at the story. The Syrian king sends an army to Dotan. The H is silent, Dotan, and surrounds the home of the prophet. Dotan is in the middle of Samaria, and he awakes to the sound of an army, and the servant of Elisha hits the panic button. Alas, my master! Like, what are we going to do? Now, a couple of observations. Isn't it funny how the king of Syria didn't think Elisha would know he was coming, even though he knew he was coming every other time with every other army? Does anybody see a flaw in this plan? Okay, we can't sneak up on the king of Samaria because he keeps hearing from a prophet. So here's what we'll do. We'll sneak up on the prophet. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? I'm looking through this. I know I'm a little bit cynical when I read things, but that just sounded stupid to me. Look, the world can see evidences over and over, and somehow they can convince themselves that God will not know the next move they make. You will meet unsaved people that over and over and over, God has stepped into their life, but they don't seem to get that God will step into their life. Let me say this. God won't be mocked. He won't be tricked by your games. So, you might be able to minister, but just because you're able to serve God doesn't mean you can see well. There are a great many servants of God who are almost blind when it comes to faith. They don't think biblically. They don't think spiritually. They think physically. And I think it's kind of interesting that we can be disciplined in ministry. We can be blind to God's presence at the same time. We can be blind to God's protection. I love, Psalm 139 says that we cannot go from His presence. Where can I go from Your presence, Lord? Where can I run that You won't see me? Remember, when you sin, you don't hate God, you forget God, right? It's also worth remembering today that God's not afraid of your troubles. He's not afraid of the darkness of the world, and somebody has said that God is so big that the heavens cannot contain Him and small enough to dwell within our hearts. It's important for us to understand Elisha lived in the presence of God, therefore he was not worried that the king of Aram was going to be his undoing. God was over him. Abraham went forth because he knew God was with him. Moses went into the wilderness confident of God's presence. Nehemiah rebuilt the walls despite the ridicule from his companions. And the world crowns success, but God crowns faithfulness. Elisha just kept doing right. Now, there's another resource we forget God has. The angel of the Lord encamps round about those who fear Him and delivers them. That's Psalm 34. He's not kidding. Here's a story. The story is, alas, Master, what are we going to do? God, would You open my servant's eyes so he can see what I see? And suddenly the servant is able to see that the number is with us is greater than the number against us. Listen to me. 1/3 of the angels fell. That means 2/3 didn't. Our team has always been bigger. The other team fluffs up to look bigger. Okay? And the reality is that it's true that darkness has covered the face of the earth, and it's hard for the Son of Man to find one in whom there is faith. But don't get the idea you're alone down here. You're not. There are millions of Christians who are as committed as you and more and ready to die for Jesus Christ. Don't forget that. Don't forget, because the news is going to act like everybody's leaving the church. All the young people are leaving the church. Don't you think that for a minute. You walk into any praise and worship meeting and look around and see a bunch of kids your age. Don't tell me they're all leaving. Not the ones I know. The ones who know God aren't going anywhere. So we got to stop believing, because what the enemy does is puff up, puff up, puff up. Somebody wrote something that I want to pass to you. It's called The Christian's Horizon. It says, what do I see as I look back? Millions of mercies along life's track. God's love shining where all was black. That's what I see looking back. What do I see as I look within? A heart by my Savior redeemed from sin. A hope through His grace, heaven's joys to win. That's what I see looking to Him. What do I see as I look on? Burdens lifted and trials gone. A light at even, surpassing dawn. That's what I see looking on. What do I see as I look above? God's own banner. His name is love. Love unspeakable, wonderful love. That's what I see above. I think one of the things I go over in my mind over and over when I look at the story, and I come back to this story a lot, I have been in many a meeting where people sat there and said, we can't make this step because we just don't have the resources. And nobody's talking faith, everybody's talking bank books. I believe that a vision of what God says is true helps us do the impossible, know the unknowable, see the invisible, and actually accomplish the unthinkable. I think those things happen when people see what God is doing. You didn't even have the ability to redeem yourself from sin. So you've already been through a miracle, okay? Now all the rest of the miracles are just like that. God doing what you could not do.